Once upon a time, we did the King's Indian defense, and it was a pretty flexible system for black, which, as you recall, Gary Kasparov called a man's opening. You know, and the idea behind it being that it is a fighting opening. It's not one of these drawish openings. It's an opening that usually plays for a win. And typically, defenses can be adapted into attacks. They can be used as white, and oftentimes it's seen as advantageous because as white you get essentially an extra tempo for that attack. So today we're going to look at the King's Indian attack, and Warren was telling me that he uses this sometimes or often in his 1 minute games, and you know, being number 3 in the world right now in 1 minute, I guess it's working pretty well. So anyway, I'll turn it over to him so that we can see exactly how this system works and to look at some great games that have been played using this system. But I want you to pay particular attention to how this compares to the King's Indian defense and how this opening is so versatile and flexible and how it can be reached from so many positions. Because if you're one of those people like me who doesn't really know how to play against Stevens Caro-Kann or against somebody else who plays French defense, this, or even Sicilian, this is a system that can be played against all of them. So if you're looking for a versatile, flexible opening, this could be one for you. So let me turn it over to the expert then.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know much about the history behind the King's Indian defense, but there was a candidates tournament in 1953 in Zurich where a lot of these Soviet GMs and also, you know, Miguel Najdorf and, you know, a couple others kind of really developed the opening. And after they had some great successes in that tournament in 1953, became more popular. It was considered much more interesting and playable. And because of its success on the black side, people started thinking, well, you know, maybe I can just play with white too, since the concept is pretty simple. I mean, generally speaking, you're going to play the same things. You're going to fianchetto your king's bishop, play knight f3, other knight's going to go to d2, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of games with Fischer and other players that started playing with the white pieces too. And like Lucas was saying, the advantage is you can play it against pretty much anything. So it's pretty flexible in that regard. So there are a couple of guys, you know, that were really good with it. Fischer was really good with it. And today, well, Botvinnik and Petrosian even played it with white. Today, Carlsen is actually pretty good with it. He's won a couple nice games. There's one game where he crushed Caruana in a tiebreak game. It was like a 20-move game. I didn't include it here, but because it wasn't really instructive. But you know, it's even dangerous today. And I'll have a game later with Kramnik too. He's a very good player of it. He plays a mean KIA. Okay, so this first game I think is pretty instructive. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't look up the strength of this guy he played against. You know, it wasn't a name I recognized, so I assume he's pretty much a fish. But that's fine. The game is still instructive. So, you know, the setup from black is pretty common. You'll see a lot in either Sicilian or French move order. If you think about it, it's like a reverse Queen's Gambit decline, basically. So it's just really solid. And, you know, because of the setup, I wanted to find a game that I played against Aditya. So I played a game against him in 2007 in the Denker, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't have the score sheet. It's not online. So I was black in that game. I wanted to show that. But just to show some example where black succeeds, you know, but that's okay. So as you see, you know, white's pieces are pretty much the same as they are on the King's Indian. You have the kingside fianchetto, and the knights are on d2 and f3. Now, you usually don't put your knight on c3 just to prevent exchanges on the d-file. So, you know, just briefly going back to the opening, you'll notice white played knight d2. You know, knight c3 is just less good because black can take on e4. And you can take with the knight, but then it's kind of unclear why you play d3 and not d4. And of course, you don't want to take with the d-pawn because we're playing a man's opening. We don't want to exchange queens, correct? Okay. All right. So e5 is a very common thrust. Unlike the normal King's Indian, the idea is you're trying to gain space on the king side here, and you're going to push this black knight from the king side. So black just expands on the queen side. And this is another really common move in this position. Again, the idea is to, well, it's two parts. You're able to bring this knight into the game via h2, and you're also maybe going to push this pawn to h6, and it gives you the g5 square that you can use for your pieces too. So this is just a generally very useful move in this position. So bishop f4, overprotecting that e5 pawn. Now a3 is pretty interesting. It's kind of surprising for me because generally speaking, when you're being attacked on a wing, you don't want to move a pawn over there. But I guess Fischer's idea was to guard this b4 square so the black knight could never move there. He also stops the advance of the pawn to a3, which I guess could be annoying because, like, say white did something like this. Now, this d4 square could be useful for black in the future. Maybe. But anyway, this is kind of interesting. So a3. Now, taking from black makes a lot of sense here because your counterplay is going to be on the queen side. So you want to open that side of the board up for your pieces. Now, this bishop h3 may look kind of mysterious, okay? But part of the idea is that in some case you might sacrifice on e6 or on d5, and you'll see how that can happen later. Now you may wonder why he didn't play knight g4, but knight g4 would just block the bishop. So it's just a temporary setback. The knight can head for e4 instead. Yeah, taking the knight was maybe an iffy decision, although white was hinting at some ideas with maybe queen h5 and then knight takes e6. So it's a very tricky position for black. Of course, it pains me to see the dark square bishop go because it's a bishop, and especially in this position, the dark squares are very weak for black. Yeah, and this move was he was trying to stop knight e4, but it allows white a very nice move here. So white to play, how do you think white should continue the attack? May not seem terribly obvious.
Bishop f6?
Yeah, bishop f6. So the point here is that you're threatening queen g5, and if we take the bishop, then after takes, black's going to be hard pressed to avoid checkmate. This g7 square is pretty devastating, right? Okay. I mean, for example, like king f8, just queen h7, and queen h8 is kind of hard to stop.
Kind of.
To say the least, right? Okay. So the bishop is immune, and this g7 point is just really weak. So queen e8, the idea is the queen can go to f8. So now queen g5, you can defend that. But knight e4. Yeah, this move looks kind of scary, but yeah, it doesn't really work. Although it does take a little bit of tactics to win the game.
Huh.
So white's going for an attack. Takes, or rook a7, sorry. Bishop g2. This move may look harmless, but white wins pretty much by force here. So white to play, how do you finish off the game?
Queen h6.
Yeah, I was thinking now the queen just.
Okay,
No, they're
queen f8.
Now,
Just take
oh, can you sack? Can you sack on h7?
And then after king takes,
Take
H takes G.
and then king takes g6.
bishop e4.
Yeah. So that's what he did. He just took.
Yep.
it did.
h6 is pretty good.
Yeah, the point being here, I mean, obviously if you go back,
Just mate.
that's mate.
Yeah.
If you go forward, this is
Oh,
mate
okay.
too.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, that's lovely.
So white can't avoid the mate, or black can't, sorry. Yeah, so that was kind of a crush. Black didn't really put up the best resistance, but that was really illustrative of some of the ideas, some of the key moves going back. So I think the arrangement of white's pieces is pretty easy to remember. You'll pretty much always play the same thing. Fianchetto, knights in f3 and d2. And then when black doesn't play e5 like this, or doesn't play to stop it, you'll push gain that space on the king side and push this black knight away from defending the king. And we gather the cloud of pieces around the king. You know, you play knight f1 and slowly move them over to the king side. Put the bishop on f4 to over defend e5. We put the bishop on h3 to give us some tactics. By the way, one idea of this is that we'll see it in a later game. But if black plays like queen c7 here, how does white play? White has a really good move here.
Take on e6? No.
No, bishop e6, f6.
Yeah,
Take on c5.
What's that?
Knight takes d5.
Exactly.
yeah.
So this is the idea with the bishop on h3. So after it takes, you'll play e6, and his bishop's on f4 and h3 will create a nice crossfire.
Mm.
And then you'll take on d7 next move, and it'll just get a crushing position for white. So this is a kind of a common theme where white will sack and push e6. Okay. All right. Any questions about this game?
Would you say that the move order is kind of dependent on how black plays, or is it?
Of how white handles a piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some subtleties. I'll bring up one of them in the Geller game.
Okay.
Yeah. But generally speaking, it shouldn't matter too much in this particular line. Okay. Now let's look at the Geller game. Here we go. All right. So again, we're going to have a similar position. We see almost the exact same setup. So this time, black's put the queen on c7. So this is where you have that tactic with bishop h3, knight d5 happen a lot, because a lot of times black will play queen c7 early to attack this guy. So that's, I mean, in the last game we saw it didn't really happen, but that's how that tactic can occur. So again, we see very similar setup, right? And here's where black plays knight d4. So black was actually waiting for white to play knight f1, because if black had played knight d4 here, white could just take and play knight f3. And this pawn is annoying to defend. So once the knight goes to f1, though, now it's harder for white to attack this pawn with the knight. So white have to waste a couple of tempi to get there. So this is the common theme you'll see from black trying to open up the queen side. So in the other game we saw the b file open, but this time we see the c file being open. C file is generally a little more useful because c2 is a little bit weaker. So this is a kind of an interesting plan. It's not perfect though, as we'll see.
Is the knight on f1 aiming for h2 or g3?
It's going to go to h2 and then usually g4 or f3.
Okay.
One of those squares. Kind of depends on what black does.
Okay. So later on, that pawn, black's pawn on d4 will be a target.
It could be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, black's going to attack c2 very quickly. And you'll see that. So bishop here, again, over defending that pawn. Now white has ideas again of takes and e6. Okay, that idea is always in the air in this position. But rook a6. So this move is very nice, threatening to bring the rook over here on the c file. Okay. One advantage of moving the bishop too is that we can protect c2 with the rook. So knight h2, as predicted. Rook c1, bishop a6, and now bishop takes d5. So white's going to take advantage of this e6 thrust. Now white could have tried for a kingside attack, but it'd be very risky here because after rook fc8, black's going to have heavy pressure on the c file. So white's trying to open up the position a little bit. Okay. So takes and e6. So even though black has the two bishops here, this bishop is pretty bad. Its scope is very limited, and these doubled pawns in the d file don't help either. And here white played a very nice move. White would like to pressure this pawn. Rook e1 is possible, but after rook e1, queen c6 is a little bit annoying because of that c2 point. So white came up with kind of a clever solution. So he played bishop e5. So he's immediately attacking d4 now, and he hasn't left c2 weak. And after takes, rook e1. So now he's attacking that. Now bishop g7, looks like it may work because you're attacking the queen and defending your bishop. But you know, white has a good move here.
Well, don't you just take the queen?
Yeah, don't you take the queen with the rook?
Yeah, you can take the queen. Actually, a slightly better version is to take the bishop first and then take the queen, because now we can take d4. So
Okay.
this leaves black with a light squared bishop instead of dark squared,
Ah.
which is kind of nice.
Wait, well,
As opposed to here, where
Right.
black can defend it with the bishop.
oh, I see what you're
Okay.
doing.
Okay.
I mean, black's position is still very poor, but okay. So rook e1, the bishop can't be saved, so f4, trying to get some counterplay. Takes an h5, prying open the king side. And here, what do you think white should do? I mean, it looked like his last move may have been a mistake now, because now your knight's being attacked and he just took your pawn on g3.
Knight g5.
Knight g5, that looks kind of dangerous after
It
taking that
does
pawn.
look very dangerous.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's white has much simpler. After it takes g6, what after rook f3?
Oh wait, hold on a second. Okay, if pawn takes, and then rook takes knight, then pawn takes h7 with check.
So h takes g6, rook takes f3, rook e8 check. I'll give you that's correct.
Okay.
So queen takes e8, and then what?
And then
Obviously, if you play king, or sorry, after rook e8,
Oh, if queen takes e8, then queen takes h7.
h7.
and then king f8.
Queen f8.
Queen f7.
No, because
No,
the
queen-
the queen's on e8.
The rook and the queen both defend
Yeah,
that.
they do.
Does G7 work?
Yeah, g7 and you queen would check.
Oh, okay.
So take,
Doesn't
E8,
let you yeah,
okay.
check, take.
and you're gonna queen would check.
Yeah.
Ah.
Man.
Yep. So the knight's untouchable. So take, and now white can finish off the game nicely. You could just go into the endgame trading queens, and you're much better. But there's far easier.
Let's see. Queen e6.
Rook
check.
g5.
Yeah, rook g5.
G5, oh.
The idea is that you're attacking the queen again, and if you take, we fork the king and the bishop,
Nice.
Mm.
and you can't just defend the queen because then there's a pin on the g file. So yeah, kind of a quick game, but it illustrated some ideas. You know, important one to be aware of from black's perspective is the idea of knight d4 opening up the c file. Okay. Any questions about this game?
What's surprising to me is that black was so heavily invested in queenside expansion, but it didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, he didn't quite handle it so correctly. But yeah, I mean, I'm just showing this from white's perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go over black's another time.
No, it just seems like, well, in every King's Indian attack, it seems like black plays for the queen side.
Yeah,
But here, just nothing materialized from it.
yeah. I mean,
Instead, it was just Fischer's.
this light squared bishop was a huge problem for him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's because of these tactics on d5 that when I play this line with black, I actually usually put my queen on b6 instead. So instead of going back to the opening, instead of queen c7 here, I'd play a move like b5, and I put my queen on b6, so that these tactics on d5 don't work. So Fischer wouldn't have had the option with takes and e6. So it does make a slight difference. The downside is you pressure the c file less, but that's okay if you can keep white from opening up the position. Okay, now let's look at this Eve Cuff game. So this features a different setup from black. So again, we have a similar setup, but this time black put bishop on d6. Okay, so in this line, black is going to play against this e5 advance. Now, the advantage of that for black is that you make it harder for white to gain space over there, right? As we'll see, Fischer solves this problem, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can be cards and know how to fix it. So same setup, and now we see knight h4. So the point is, if you don't move your knight and move your f-pawn, then you're not going to achieve this advance. For example, if you play rook e1, but black will play queen c7, again guarding this against this advance. And if you play queen e2, again trying to push for it, black can just play f6. So he's not going to let you play e5 easily. So you're going to have to bring your f-pawn into the game. So knight h4, and then f4. Okay. So he's going to try to force through this e5 move. Yeah, I'm not sure that the c4 push kind of gave black some problems later, I think. I mean, it does give him a check on c5, but that's hardly very useful. So the problem now is this bishop scope is gone and the c4 pawn is weak. So the white pieces cloud over the king. So white's playing for this f5 advance. Maybe f5, f6 would just be devastating for black. So he's trying to get rid of a piece, but unfortunately you're giving up a powerful bishop. Of course, right? Yeah, the knight's immune.
Yeah.
Right? That's no fun. So queen up, knight back,
Yeah.
and the white knight goes over here.
Oh.
And now black came up with a clever defense. I mean, it looked like black's completely dead here because if you just play like, say, well, I guess black really doesn't have much options. You can't move the rook, or you can't move the queen to c7 because it just hangs.
Can you just take on d1?
Well, if you take on d1, there's just mate at h7.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a
But
problem.
yeah, black came up with this clever move, rook g8. So now you can't take on d7 because you get mated on g1.
Ooh, really?
But white has a crusher here.
What about F7 now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this way you threaten mate in 1.
Yeah,
right?
boy. Sensei.
Yeah, if you take the pawn, then bishop e5. And however black blocks, you mate on h7.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter what piece you block with. So yeah, that's just a crusher. Yeah, so do you have any questions about the KIA so far? Anything seem kind of weird, mysterious?
When we did the King's Indian defense, there was a lot of emphasis on g4, and black trying to get control of g4.
Yeah.
Is white similarly playing for g5 here?
They're slightly different positions. So, I mean, looking at this Evkov game. So, you know, the difference between this and our marginal platinum positions that we were looking at before, position's more open. So you typically aren't going to use that g-pawn as a battering ram in this line. Even in the more closed lines, like looking at this Fischer game. So even here, you're not usually going to use a g-pawn as a battering ram. Instead, you're going to use your h-pawn, and you're going to use your pieces to attack instead of your pawns. So you would play moves like knight h2, h5, h6. You might try to exchange dark squared bishops and then say mate on g7. You know, something like that would be like a really ideal thing. You know? But yeah, you usually won't use your g-pawn in the King's Indian attack. I mean, if the position's really closed, then it could happen, but it's more rare. All right, and then we'll look at this Kramnik game too, because instead of playing e4 first like Fischer did, he just played knight f3. So this is another way of playing it too. You don't have to play e4 first. And I don't know if you guys gathered this from playing at DT a lot, but instead of playing e4 at DT, I prefer to just play knight f3 first. Yeah, just The advantage of knight f3, by the way, is that after e4, you do have to deal with e5. So that's not the case after knight f3. So you avoid, king pawn positions basically. So this game was kind of interesting. So instead of the French or Sicilian, we're facing a Slav this time. Okay, and against queen pawn defenses like the Slav, white's going to handle it slightly differently. So instead of developing the knight really early here, white's going to play queen e1. Okay, so the idea is you want to play an early e4 and use a queen to support that. Okay. And the benefit of not developing the knight early is that you keep the diagonal for this bishop open, and you have the option of bringing your knight to a3 instead. Okay. Yeah, actually, in the Kramnik talked about this. He said knight f8 was a mistake because it didn't give this bishop much space to roam, and you'll see why that's important in a minute. So maybe instead he suggested like queen e7. This move may look kind of stupid, but after knight f5, you're going to play queen e6, and then it's actually useful that you guard the c4 square because you keep the knight from getting into the game. So it would have been still pretty interesting after this. But after knight f8, white got a pretty nice advantage. So b4, gaining some space. Knight f5, pursuing that dark squared bishop. Yeah, and already white has a pretty nice position. Black has a couple problems. This bishop is pretty bad, and secondly, white has the two bishops. So those two factors make it a tricky position for black. So just f3. Yeah, this bishop is very, very weak. Yeah, white's bishop will be able to get into the game later via f1. So white's heading to this d6 square. And here white found a really nice move.
Is it rook takes knight?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Because queen takes, then you get tempo on the queen.
You get two pawns.
Yeah.
In the middle game, by the way, when you get two pawns and a minor piece for a rook, it's usually pretty good. Especially in this position where it's unclear how useful black's rooks can be. So white just has a beautiful position here. The main reason being it's hard for me to see how black can really improve. So here he just tried to get he sacked back the exchange in order to win a pawn, but he's still down a pawn, unfortunately.
What is he doing?
Yeah, here Kramnik played a little bit weird. If I were him, I probably would have just taken the rook right away, but he just played queen e3. I guess he's trying to annoy black by tying that rook down.
Why not queen g3?
Well, queen g3, he's just going to defend it. I mean, that's fine, yeah. White still up a pawn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just if I were him, I would have considered just taking and playing f4, But queen e3, I guess, matter of taste. I'm not sure why Lagrave decided on rook d8. You think he would have played like a6 or something, but I guess he's trying to be more active. This is a nice tactic. White attacks not only the rook, but also this bishop. Yeah, the only way to defend would be queen f6, but then white just trades queens and takes on b5. And then it's an endgame where you have two extra pawns. So black didn't want to go in for that, so he just sacked the piece. But it's not exactly a sound sacrifice. Yeah, Kramnik cleans up pretty quickly. Yeah, now white's threatening queen e8, queen g6, and mate.
Yeah.
So g5, but the downside is you really open up your king. Check, and then rook b1. And rook b7 is unstoppable.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty scary. Yeah, so the thing to remember from this game is that you're going to delay the development of your knight really early on. Ideally, you want to play queen e1 and then e4. Okay. Against the French and Sicilian, you can just play knight bd2 early on and play for e4.
He's fine.
Okay. Any questions about this? I definitely suggest looking at some Fischer games. He had a bunch of games in this opening, and he played it really well. So there's some really good examples there. From the black side, Kasparov actually had a lot of success against it. So if you're looking for examples of how black should play, he had some nice games.